Picture this, a sun-baked land along the mighty Nile River, where towering pyramids scrape the sky and the secrets of the pharaohs whisper on the desert wind. We often imagine this world filled with gold, grandeur, and monumental stone, but what if I told you that one of the most profound insights into the ancient Egyptian soul doesn't come from a royal tomb or a towering obelisk, but from a small, often overlooked object you might find on a dressing table? I'm talking about the humble makeup palette. We see makeup today as a tool for enhancement, a bit of personal expression, but for the Egyptians, it was something far more powerful. It was a bridge between the earthly and the divine, a marker of status, a form of protection, and a key to good health. These beautifully crafted palettes were not mere vanity items, they were essential companions in life, death, and the journey to the afterlife, and they hold stories that can change the way we see this incredible civilization forever. When you hold one of these ancient Egyptian makeup palettes in your hand, or even just see one in a museum case, you're not just looking at a piece of carved stone or slate. You are holding a fragment of someone's daily ritual, their hopes, their beliefs, and their identity. The very act of grinding minerals like green malachite or iconic black coal on its surface was a deeply symbolic act. It connected the individual to the gods, with certain styles and colors believed to offer the protection of deities like Horus with his all-seeing eye. This was a culture that understood the power of appearance in a way that was completely interwoven with spirituality. To be adorned was to be empowered, to be shielded from evil forces, and to present yourself in a state of harmony and balance, which was the ultimate goal of Egyptian life. It was a practice for everyone, from the laborers in the fields to the royal family in the palace, making it a truly universal thread in the fabric of their society. So, get ready to journey with me beyond the glass of the museum display and into the heart of ancient Egyptian life. We are about to examine these incredible artifacts not just as archaeological finds, but as personal treasures. We will uncover how a simple slab of stone served as a pharmacy, a spiritual amulet, and a bold social statement all at once. We'll explore the fascinating ingredients they used, the intricate rituals surrounding their application, and what these palettes reveal about their concepts of beauty, health, and the afterlife. This is a story written not in hieroglyphs on a temple wall, but in the worn surfaces of these personal objects, and it's a story that offers a surprisingly intimate and human connection to a people who have captivated our imaginations for millennia. This is the real, untold story of beauty along the Nile. To truly understand their significance, we need to start with the object itself. What exactly are we looking at when we talk about an ancient Egyptian makeup palette? At its most basic, it was a personal, portable workshop for creating cosmetics. Picture a smooth, flat slab of stone, often no larger than your hand. The most common materials were fine-grained stones like slate or schist, chosen because they were hard enough to withstand grinding, yet had a slightly gritty surface perfect for crushing minerals into a fine powder. These weren't rough, unfinished rocks, they were carefully shaped, often into clean rectangles or ovals, and then polished to a smooth finish, making them pleasing to hold and use. But the Egyptians also had a wonderful flair for the symbolic, and many of the most stunning palettes are carved into the shapes of animals. You'll find palettes in the form of fish, turtles, hippos, and birds. These weren't just whimsical decorations, each animal held deep meaning, connecting the act of adornment to the power and attributes of that creature. A fish for fertility and rebirth, for instance, or a protective hippo like the goddess Taweret. The design of these palettes was brilliantly practical. The flat central area served as the main grinding surface. Here, a small piece of raw mineral, like a chunk of green malachite or dark gray galena, would be placed. With a smooth, rounded stone called a pestle, The user would then grind and crush the mineral, adding a few drops of water or perhaps a dab of oil to create a smooth, spreadable paste. But the ingenuity doesn't stop there. Look closer, and you'll often see a series of small, circular depressions carved into one end of the palette. These were the pigment wells. Imagine them as tiny paint pots, each one capable of holding a different colored paste. This allowed an individual to prepare and store multiple colors at once: the vibrant green for the upper lid, the powerful black kohl for outlining the eyes, and maybe even a red ochre for the cheeks and lips. This single elegant stone tablet was, in effect, a complete cosmetic kit, a self-contained universe of color and ritual that could be used for a daily transformation that was as much about magic and medicine as it was about beauty. Now, with that intimate understanding of the palette as an object, we can truly appreciate the profound roles it played. To dismiss these cosmetics as mere decoration would be to miss their entire point. In ancient Egypt, makeup was a multifunctional tool for survival, spirituality, and social navigation. Its application was a daily act layered with meaning, far exceeding our modern concept of beauty. This practice was anchored in three powerful, interconnected functions: spiritual and magical protection, medicinal and practical use, and as a clear marker of social status and identity. Each time an Egyptian reached for their palette, they were engaging in an act that served their body, their soul, and their place in the community all at once. First and foremost, this was a world seen through a lens of magic and religion. The Egyptians believed strongly in the power of the evil eye and malevolent spirits that could bring disease and misfortune. The heavy, dark lines of kohl dramatically outlining the eyes were not just a fashion statement, they were a powerful amulet. This distinctive style was meant to mimic the sacred eye of the falcon god Horus, the Wedjat eye, a potent symbol of protection, wholeness, and royal power. By adorning their own eyes in this way, individuals were invoking the god's watchful protection, creating a spiritual shield against unseen forces. It was believed that illness could enter the body through the eyes, so by magically fortifying them, they were practicing a form of preventative medicine. Even the colors held spiritual significance. The vibrant green pigment made from malachite was associated with the god Osiris and the lush, life-giving Nile Valley, symbolizing fertility, resurrection, and new life. So, every stroke of color was a prayer, a protective charm, and a connection to the divine, seamlessly woven into the fabric of daily life. Beyond the spiritual realm, these cosmetics served remarkably practical and medicinal purposes that demonstrate the Egyptians' sophisticated understanding of their environment and health. The glaring Egyptian sun reflecting off the desert sands and the Nile's surface could be blinding. The kohl, typically made from the mineral galena, possessed a brilliant pragmatic function. It helped reduce the sun's glare, much like the black grease smeared under the eyes of modern athletes or soldiers. This wasn't just a happy accident, it was a calculated adaptation to their environment, but the genius goes even deeper. Scientific analysis of ancient kohl has revealed it contained lead-based compounds. While toxic in large quantities, in the low doses used around the eyes, these substances would have stimulated the production of nitric oxide, which can boost the immune system and help fight off eye infections, which were common in the dusty, riverine environment. The makeup, therefore, functioned as a daily dose of antibacterial medicine, preventing conditions like conjunctivitis and other inflammations, so that iconic eyeliner was simultaneously a pair of ancient sunglasses, a medicinal salve, and a spiritual shield, a truly elegant solution to multiple challenges of living along the Nile. Finally, these palettes and the cosmetics they produced were a loud and clear broadcast of one's social identity. In a society as structured and hierarchical as ancient Egypt, appearance was a direct reflection of status, wealth, and role. The quality of your palette said a lot about you. A laborer might possess a simple, unadorned slate slab, purely functional. A noble or a member of the royal family, however, would own a palette made of the finest materials exquisitely carved from imported ivory, decorated with gold leaf, or fashioned from rare and precious stones. The mere act of owning and using such an object was a display of wealth and access to resources. Furthermore, the application of makeup crossed gender lines. While we often associate elaborate eye makeup with iconic figures like Cleopatra, it was worn universally by both men and women. For the elite, the style could be incredibly intricate, with elaborate, elongated lines that swept back toward the temples, a look that required skill, time, and the help of servants to achieve perfectly. This signaled a life of leisure and privilege. In death, this social statement continued, as palettes were common grave goods, ensuring the individual remained protected, healthy, and visually defined by their status for all eternity. To understand how these personal items became so central to Egyptian life, we need to travel back in time to their very origins, where we find something quite different from the handheld grooming kits we've been discussing. The story begins in the pre-dynastic period, a time before the first pyramids, when Egypt was a land of competing kingdoms slowly moving toward unification. Here, we encounter the magnificent ancestors of our cosmetic palettes, the large ceremonial palettes. These were not personal vanity items at all. They were monumental objects, often made from a single slab of siltstone and sometimes reaching over a foot in height. They served as grand ceremonial objects, likely used in temples for the grinding of cosmetics used in religious rituals, or perhaps as votive offerings to the gods. The most famous example is the Narmer palette, a stunning artifact that commemorates the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under King Narmer. This palette is covered in intricate, symbolic carvings depicting the king's power and his divine mandate. It tells a story of conquest and order, but its shape, the classic shield-like form with a central grinding area, reveals its direct lineage to the act of preparing pigments. These early palettes were statements of state power and religious ideology, carved in stone for eternity. As Egypt transitioned into the stability of the Old Kingdom, the age of the Great Pyramid builders, we see a fascinating shift in the palette's purpose. The grand state-sponsored ceremonial palette begins to fade from prominence, and in its place emerges the smaller, more personal cosmetic palette. This evolution is incredibly telling. With a strong, centralized government and a more structured society, the need for massive objects proclaiming political unification diminished. Instead, the focus turned inward toward the individual and their personal journey in this life and the next. Palettes shrank in size, becoming objects designed for actual daily use. They were still beautifully made, often retaining those symbolic animal shapes like the fish or the hippo, but they were now functional possessions that would have been part of a person's daily toilette. This change reflects a society that was consolidating its identity. The grand narratives of state were now being complemented by the personal narratives of its people. The palette was democratizing, moving from the exclusive realm of temple and royal ceremony into the homes and tombs of a much broader segment of the population. This trend of personalization only intensified as we moved through the Middle and New Kingdoms. The palettes became even more refined and varied. While simple slate and schist versions remained common for the average person, the elite began to commission palettes from more luxurious materials. Imagine a palette exquisitely carved from ivory, its surface gleaming, or one inlaid with precious stones or gold leaf. The designs also evolved, sometimes becoming more abstract and elegant. This era also saw the rise of the vanity case, which might include not just a palette and pestle, but also small pots for storing pre-made coal, mirrors of polished bronze or silver, and cosmetic spoons. The palette was no longer a standalone object, it was becoming the centerpiece of an entire grooming set. This reflects the increasing sophistication and wealth of the Egyptian Empire during its peak, especially in the New Kingdom. Personal adornment was not just about protection and status anymore, it was also an expression of personal taste and luxury, a way to enjoy the riches of a powerful civilization. By the time we reach the late period and into the Ptolemaic era, the era of Greek influence culminating with Cleopatra VII, the humble stone palette begins to share the stage with new forms. While traditional stone palettes were still used, we see a massive rise in the use of small, purpose-made coal pots, often made of faience, glass, or alabaster. These containers held pre-ground coal paste, suggesting a move away from the daily ritual of grinding one's own pigments and toward a more convenient, ready-to-use product. This shift speaks volumes about changing times. Egypt was a crossroads of international trade and culture, and with new influences came new technologies and habits. The fundamental practices of wearing eye makeup remained as strong as ever. The famous images of Cleopatra with her dramatic, lined eyes are a testament to that, but the tools became more specialized. The evolution from the monumental Narmer palette to a delicate glass coal tube traces a journey from a society defining itself through grand, collective symbols to one that also valued individual convenience and a diverse material culture, all while holding fast to the core spiritual and practical beliefs that made makeup indispensable for over 3,000 years. And to see how all these threads of function, symbolism, and power come together in one breathtaking object, we must turn to the ultimate case study, the palette of Narmer. Discovered in the ancient temple at Hierakonpolis, this is not the kind of palette you'd find on a dressing table. Carved from a single piece of polished greywacke stone, it stands over 2 feet tall, an imposing and monumental slab that immediately declares its importance. Its very size tells us this was never meant for personal grooming. This was a ceremonial object of the highest order, created to be displayed in a sacred space, likely used to grind cosmetics for ritual purposes or to be offered to the gods themselves. Its surface is a dense tapestry of carved scenes, a political and religious manifesto written not in ink, but in stone, documenting the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under the powerful King Narmer. This single artifact encapsulates the entire journey of the palette, transforming it from a practical tool into a canvas for the founding myth of a nation. The front side of the palette is dominated by a powerful, iconic scene. In the center, we see the elongated necks of 2 mythical beasts known as serpoperid creatures with the bodies of leopards and the long, winding necks of serpents. Their necks are intertwined, forming the central depression, the cosmetic well where the pigments would have been ground. This is symbolism at its most profound. The serpopard was a creature of chaos, representing the untamed, wild forces that existed before the ordered world of Egypt was created. By taming their necks, binding them together into the very functional core of the palette, the artist is visually declaring that the act of creation of establishing order, known as Ma'at, is literally containing and controlling chaos. The cosmetic mixture prepared in that well would have been imbued with this powerful symbolism, making the act of adorning a divine statue or a king a ritual of maintaining cosmic order itself. Turn the palette over and the narrative intensifies, moving from symbolic containment to direct royal action. The largest figure is King Narmer himself, shown wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt, towering over a captive enemy he is about to strike. This is the classic smiting scene, a motif that would become a standard for depicting pharaonic power for the next 3,000 years. Below the king's feet lie the bodies of his defeated foes, and to the right, the falcon god Horus perches on a cluster of papyrus plants, symbolizing Lower Egypt, with a rope tied to the nose of a human head that emerges from the land. This imagery is unequivocal. The king is not just a mortal ruler, he is the human agent of the gods, with Horus himself ensuring the subjugation of the northern kingdom. It's a brutal and brilliant piece of political propaganda, stating that the unification of Egypt was divinely sanctioned and achieved through the king's unstoppable might. But the symbolism doesn't end with conquest. Look to the top of both sides of the palette, and you'll find the central cosmetic wells flanked by two cow heads with human faces. These are believed to represent the celestial cow goddess Bat, or an early form of the goddess Hathor, the divine mother and a protector of the king. Her presence literally frames the ritual activity, blessing the very act that takes place in the central well, and on the bottom of the main side, a powerful bull, a symbol of the king's ferocious strength, is shown trampling an enemy and demolishing the walls of a city. Every single element, from the grandest human figure to the smallest decorative detail, is loaded with meaning. The palette of Narmer thus transcends any simple function. It is a masterwork of early Egyptian art, a historical document of unparalleled importance, and a theological statement. It argues that the king's power, the state's stability, and the favor of the gods are all interconnected, and that the simple, universal human act of preparing cosmetics could be elevated to a ceremony that upheld the entire cosmos. Having just marveled at the symbolic power of the Narmer palette, it's natural to wonder how such objects, from the monumental to the personal, were even created. The journey from a raw, unshaped block of stone to a polished, functional work of art was a testament to Egyptian craftsmanship and patience. It all began with the careful selection of material. The most common stones were siltstone and schist, prized for their fine, dense grain which provided the perfect, slightly abrasive surface for grinding minerals without flaking or crumbling. For the elite, materials like alabaster were chosen for their translucent beauty and smooth feel, while imported ivory from elephant or hippopotamus tusks represented the absolute pinnacle of luxury. The choice of stone was the first critical decision, determining not just the palette's function and durability, but also its social status. Once a suitable stone was quarried, the real work began, using a toolkit that was simple in concept but required immense skill to wield effectively. The primary shaping was done with copper chisels. Imagine an artisan, likely working in a dedicated workshop, patiently hammering a copper chisel with a stone hammer to flake away larger, unwanted pieces, slowly revealing the rough form of a fish, a turtle, or a simple oval. For the more delicate work, like carving out the deep circular pigment wells or incising fine details into an animal's features, they would use a bow drill. This ingenious tool, with a copper tip spun by a rapidly pulled bowstring, allowed for precise, controlled carving, but the drill alone didn't cut the stone. The true magic was in the abrasive. The craftsmen used a slurry of wet sand, often quartz, which they would pour into the drill hole. The hard quartz particles in the sand, dragged under the spinning copper tip, did the actual grinding, slowly and methodically wearing away the stone. It was a process of incredible control and patience, not brute force. The final and most transformative step was the polishing, which turned a rough carved object into the smooth, tactile treasure we see in museums today. After the initial carving and drilling, the surface would be meticulously smoothed using progressively finer abrasive sands and polishing stones. An artisan might start with a coarse, gritty sand and a hard rubbing stone to remove all the tool marks, then move to finer and finer powders, possibly even using a paste made from powdered limestone or chert to achieve that signature glass-like finish. This was hours, perhaps days, of repetitive, painstaking labor. Running your thumb over the central grinding surface of a well-made palette, you can still feel the perfect balance. It's flawlessly smooth, yet retains just enough microscopic texture to be an effective grinder. This commitment to a perfect finish shows that these were not seen as disposable items. They were cherished possessions, their very feel in the hand communicating quality and care, objects of daily use that were also worthy of being buried with their owners for eternity. Now, with our understanding of the palette as a crafted object and its profound role in society, let's open it up and explore the vibrant world of color that it was designed to hold. The true magic of these artifacts comes alive when we discover the rich, symbolic pigments that were ground upon their surfaces, transforming raw minerals into a medium for protection, health, and beauty. The ancient Egyptian color palette was surprisingly diverse, each hue carefully sourced from the earth and imbued with deep meaning, creating a visual language that spoke of the Nile, the desert, and the divine. First, let's paint a picture with the vibrant, life-giving color of green, achieved primarily through the mineral malachite. This stunning green copper ore was more than just a cosmetic. It was a direct link to the fertile world along the Nile and the promise of eternal life. They sourced it from mines in the Sinai Peninsula and the Eastern Desert, a testament to the extensive trade and resource networks that existed even in early dynastic times. On the palette, a chunk of rough malachite would be ground with a pestle, slowly releasing a brilliant green powder. When mixed with a little water or oil, it created a paste that was generously applied to the upper eyelids. This color was powerfully associated with the god Osiris, the lord of the underworld and resurrection, whose skin was often depicted as green, representing vegetation and rebirth. It was also connected to Hathor, the goddess of love and joy. Wearing this green was an act of sympathetic magic, an attempt to harness the vitality of growing plants and the hope of renewal in the afterlife, making the wearer a living emblem of fertility and resurrection. For the most iconic look of all the dramatic, almond-shaped eyes that define ancient Egyptian art in our minds, they turned to a dark, powerful mineral called galena. This lead sulfide ore was the primary ingredient for the famous kohl, and it was mined from deposits in the eastern desert and possibly even sourced from as far away as the Red Sea coast. The processing was straightforward yet transformative. A piece of galena would be placed on the grinding surface of the palette and meticulously crushed into an extremely fine, dark gray, almost black, powder. This powder was then mixed with fat, oil, or water to create a smooth, creamy paste that could be applied with a small stick. The result was the intense black liner that outlined the eyes, extending in those characteristic elongated lines towards the temples. But as we've touched on, this was so much more than makeup. Galena-based kohl functioned as a powerful antibacterial agent, protecting against eye infections in the dusty climate, while also reducing the sun's glare. Spiritually, it invoked the protection of Horus, making the sacred wedget eye a permanent feature on the wearer's own face. Beyond the eyes, the Egyptians also brought color to their cheeks and lips, using a pigment as old as humanity itself, red ochre. This was an iron oxide clay readily available throughout Egypt, giving it a beautiful, earthy red hue. It was one of the most accessible cosmetics used by people across all social classes. The processing was simple. The ochre would be ground on the palette to create a fine powder, which was then mixed with water or animal fat to form a paste that could be easily applied. This red color carried a dual symbolism. On one hand, it represented life, health, and vitality, the flush of blood in a living being. It was the color of the sun god Ra, embodying his life-giving power. Yet, red was also the color of the fierce, chaotic desert and the god Set, representing danger and disorder. In the context of cosmetics, however, it was predominantly used for its positive associations, bringing a healthy, vibrant glow to the face and lips, a sign of youth and vigor that was desirable in both daily life and for the eternal existence to come. And for a more lasting, staining color, they turned to the organic power of henna, sourced from the leaves of the Lawsonia inermis plant, which was cultivated in Egypt. Henna provided a rich, reddish-brown dye. The preparation was different from the minerals. The dried, crushed leaves were mixed with a mildly acidic liquid, like lemon juice or vinegar, to create a thick paste. This paste wouldn't typically be prepared on a stone pallet. Instead, it was applied directly to the skin, hair, or nails, where it would stain the keratin, leaving a color that could last for several weeks. Henna was used to decorate the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet with intricate patterns, to color the hair, and to strengthen and stain fingernails and toenails. Its use was deeply practical, as it provided a cooling sensation in the heat and was believed to have protective qualities, but it was also undeniably decorative. The lasting nature of the stain made it a popular choice for celebrations and, crucially, for burial, ensuring the individual remained perfectly adorned forever. But to truly grasp why kohl was so much more than makeup, we need to step directly into the world of the gods and witness one of the most pivotal dramas in Egyptian mythology. This is the story of Horus, the mighty falcon-headed sky god, and his fierce battle with his uncle, Set, the god of chaos, violence, and the desert. Their conflict was an epic struggle for the throne of Egypt following the murder of Horus's father, Osiris. In a brutal and chaotic fight, Set managed to claw out one of Horus's eyes, tearing it into 6 pieces and scattering the fragments. The world was thrown into imbalance. The forces of chaos seemed to have triumphed over divine order. But the story doesn't end there. The wisdom god, Thoth, using his profound knowledge of magic and healing, searched for the pieces, reassembled them, and made the eye whole once more. This restored eye, known as the Wedjat, became one of the most potent symbols in all of ancient Egypt. It represented everything that was good and necessary for life: healing, protection, and the restoration of wholeness and cosmic order, known as Ma'at. This myth wasn't just a tale to be told, it was a reality to be lived, and the Wedjat eye became an omnipresent force in Egyptian life. You would find it carved on the prows of boats to ensure safe travel, painted on coffins to protect the deceased, and even used as a unit of measurement in medical texts for dosing medicines. But its most personal and powerful application was directly on the human body. When an Egyptian, whether a farmer or a pharaoh, took their kohl stick and carefully outlined their own eye, they were not simply following a fashion trend. They were performing a sacred, sympathetic magic. They were recreating the Wedjat eye on their own face, actively invoking the protection of Horus. The very act of applying that dark paste was a ritual that said, "What was done for the god, I do for myself." The wholeness that was restored to him, I claim for my own sight and safety. They believed that by mirroring the divine, they could harness its power, creating a spiritual shield around one of the body's most vulnerable portals. This divine protection was believed to operate on 2 crucial levels, the spiritual and the physical, which were never truly separate in the Egyptian worldview. On a spiritual plane, the kohl-lined eye was a direct ward against the evil eye and malevolent spirits that were thought to cause sudden illness or misfortune. The eye was considered a window to the soul, but also a potential entry point for dark forces. By marking it with the form of the healed, all-seeing eye of a powerful god, they were effectively placing a no trespassing sign for evil. They were fortifying their spiritual defenses. On a practical, earthly level, this belief seamlessly merged with medical necessity. The Egyptians correctly observed that many illnesses, especially eye infections like trachoma, could be debilitating. They didn't have the germ theory we have today, but they understood the symptoms of redness, swelling, and discharge. They came to believe that these physical afflictions were the visible manifestation of those same evil spirits or curses entering the body. Therefore, the kohl, as a representation of the Wejat, was a preventative medicine against both spiritual and physical blindness, a single solution addressing a threat that they saw as having two intertwined faces. This profound connection between the divine myth and the daily ritual elevates the simple cosmetic palette from a practical tool to an altar of personal devotion. Every time an individual ground their galena and prepared their kohl, they were, in a very real sense, reenacting Thoth's act of restoration. They were taking the raw, chaotic fragments of the mineral and, through the ordered, ritualistic act of grinding on a smooth, symmetrical palette, transforming it into a substance of wholeness and power. The palette itself became a sacred object in this miniature ceremony, the stable surface upon which chaos was transformed into protective order. Then, with the application, they completed the ritual, making the myth a living part of their own body. This practice provided a profound sense of agency in a world filled with unseen dangers. It meant that every person had direct access to divine protection, that they could personally enact a piece of cosmic drama on their own face each morning, armoring themselves with a symbol that had healed the heavens themselves. Among the most captivating and beautiful cosmetic objects to survive from ancient Egypt are the zoomorphic palettes, where the practical grinding slab is transformed into a stunning piece of animal art. These aren't just functional tools with a decorative flourish, they represent a profound fusion of form and meaning, where the very creature you held in your hand imbued your daily ritual with specific, potent magic. Imagine a woman carefully grinding her green malachite on the smooth, curved back of a stone turtle, or a man preparing his protective kohl on the body of a hippopotamus. This was far more personal and spiritually charged than using a simple rectangular slab. The animal was not randomly chosen, it was a deliberate selection that connected the owner to the attributes and powers of that creature, turning a cosmetic application into a focused invocation. Let's explore some of the most common and symbolic forms, starting with the fish palette. Often carved in the shape of a tilapia or a bulti fish, these were more than just a nod to a food source from the Nile. The tilapia held a particularly powerful association with fertility and rebirth. The Egyptians observed that this fish would fiercely protect its young, and they even believed it had the ability to bring its offspring back to life by holding them in its mouth. This made the fish a perfect symbol for the cycle of death and regeneration, a core tenet of Egyptian belief. Using a fish-shaped palette, therefore, linked the act of self-adornment directly to themes of new life and protection for one's family. It's easy to envision such a palette being a treasured possession for a woman, its use a daily ritual hoping for fertility or for the safeguarding of her children, making the cosmetic preparation an act of hope and magical insurance. Another powerful and surprisingly common form is the hippopotamus palette. To our modern eyes, a hippo might seem like an odd choice for a delicate object of beauty, but in ancient Egypt, the hippo was deeply associated with one of the most important protective deities, the goddess Taweret. Taweret, whose name means the Great One, was depicted as a composite creature with the head and body of a pregnant hippo, the legs and mane of a lion, and the back of a crocodile. She was the fearsome yet beloved protector of women during pregnancy and childbirth. In a time when childbirth was incredibly dangerous, Taweret was a household guardian, and a palette carved in the shape of a hippo would have been a powerful amulet. A woman using this palette to apply her makeup was doing much more than enhancing her appearance. She was actively placing herself under Taweret's protective mantle. The act of grinding the minerals on the hippo's back could be seen as a way to activate and transfer that protective power directly into the cosmetics, which would then be applied to her body, creating a spiritual shield for both herself and her unborn child. Then we have the bird palettes, which often took the form of swallows or other avian creatures. Birds in Egyptian thought were frequently connected to the soul, or the Ba. The Ba was the part of a person's spirit that was mobile and could travel after death, and it was often shown as a human-headed bird. A bird-shaped palette, therefore, carried connotations of freedom, transformation, and the soul's journey into the afterlife. Using such an object linked the daily routine of life to the eternal destiny of the spirit. Even the humble turtle palette carries a nuanced meaning. While the turtle could have negative associations linked to the god Set and chaos, it was also a creature of the primordial waters and possessed a protective shell. A turtle palette might have served as a general protective amulet, its hard back symbolizing a defense against the chaotic forces of the world, with the cosmetic ritual performed upon it serving to strengthen that spiritual armor for the wearer. What makes these zoomorphic palettes so special is that they tell us that cosmetic application was not a one-size-fits-all practice. While everyone used kohl for the general protection of Horus, the choice of a specific animal palette suggests a more personalized form of magic. A young couple hoping to start a family might commission a fish palette. A pregnant woman would seek out the powerful form of the Taweret hippo. Someone particularly concerned with their spiritual journey might choose a bird. These palettes were, in essence, customizable divine tools. They allowed an individual to tailor their daily ritual to their most pressing personal needs and desires, whether for protection, fertility, or safe passage to the afterlife. This transforms them from anonymous artifacts into deeply personal historical documents, giving us a silent yet eloquent insight into the private hopes, fears, and prayers of the people who once held them so dearly. Let's step away from the grand symbolism and into the quiet, personal moments of an Egyptian mourning. Picture a noblewoman, perhaps the wife of a high official, seated in the soft light filtering through the red screens of her home. Her cosmetic kit is laid out before her: a polished bronze mirror, a small alabaster jar of fragrant oil, and her most trusted possession, a gracefully carved siltstone palette in the shape of a protective fish. The day's first ritual is about to begin, a process that is as much about mental preparation as it is about physical adornment. She reaches for a small, smooth pestle stone and selects a rough, dark gray nugget of galena from a linen pouch. There's no hurry here. This is a deliberate, almost meditative practice. She places the nugget in the central grinding area of her palette, a surface worn smooth from years of this same daily motion. Then she adds a few precious drops of water or perhaps a dab of scented oil from her jar onto the mineral. This isn't just to create a paste. The liquid acts as a binder, preventing the precious powder from scattering to the wind, and it transforms the gritty grinding into a smoother, more sensory experience. Now the rhythmic work begins. With a firm but practiced hand, she presses the rounded end of the pestle into the galena nugget and begins to grind using a circular motion. There's a soft, scraping sound as the stone against stone breaks down the coarse mineral. Back and forth, around and around, her movements are steady and hypnotic. She isn't just crushing rock, she is alchemizing raw material into a substance of power. With each rotation of the pestle, she is physically enacting the transformation of chaos into order, turning a fragmented, rough piece of the earth into a smooth, uniform paste that will become part of her very being. This is the moment where the spiritual and the practical are literally fused together under the pressure of her hand. The time it takes is part of the ritual's power. It demands focus and presence, pulling her mind away from the distractions of the household and centering her on the sacred act of self-protection and preparation. She checks the consistency with her finger, ensuring it is perfectly smooth, with no gritty pieces that might irritate the delicate skin around her eyes. This careful attention to detail is a form of respect for the materials, for the gods she is invoking, and for her own body. Once the paste has reached the ideal, creamy texture, the application begins. She might use a delicate stick of wood, ivory, or bronze, a tool as personal as the pallet itself. Dipping the tip into the freshly made coal, she leans toward her polished bronze mirror. Her reflection is dim and wavering, but it is enough. With a steady hand, she traces the line of her upper eyelid, starting from the inner corner and sweeping outwards and upwards, elongating the line dramatically toward her temple. She repeats the process on the lower lid, creating the iconic almond shape that mirrors the eye of Horus. Every stroke is intentional. As the cool paste touches her skin, she isn't just thinking about how she looks, she is consciously inviting the protection of the gods. She is reinforcing her spiritual armor before she steps out into the world. This is her daily shield against the harsh sun, against infection, and against the unseen malevolent forces that might wish her harm. The ritual, from the first scrape of the pestle to the final graceful line of coal, is a complete cycle of creation and empowerment, a private ceremony that prepares her not just to face the day, but to command it with divine favor at her side. To unearth these intimate treasures, we must follow the footsteps of archaeologists into the very heart of ancient Egyptian sacred spaces, where the sand has preserved the final resting places of the people who cherished these objects. The story of where these pallets are found is a narrative in itself, revealing not just their function in life, but their profound importance in the journey beyond. The most significant discoveries have come from monumental burial grounds, with sites like Abydos, Hierakonpolis, and Giza standing out as veritable libraries of early Egyptian culture, written not on papyrus, but in the artifacts interred with the dead. At Abydos, one of the most ancient royal cemeteries and the cult center for the god Osiris, excavations have uncovered pallets in tombs dating back to the very dawn of Egyptian history. Here, in the burial chambers of some of the first pharaohs and their elite courtiers, these items were placed with clear intention. Similarly, the site of Hierakonpolis, the legendary City of the Hawk and an early power center, has yielded spectacular finds, including the ceremonial Narmer pallet itself, discovered in a deposit within the temple precinct, showing that these objects were deemed worthy as offerings to the divine. And of course, the plateau of Giza, with its iconic pyramids, has provided pallets from the mastaba tombs of officials who served the great kings, connecting this personal practice directly to the highest echelons of Old Kingdom society. Overwhelmingly, the context of these discoveries is funerary. An ancient Egyptian tomb was not merely a hole in the ground to dispose of a body, it was a carefully curated package for eternity, a permanent home stocked with everything the deceased would need to live comfortably in the afterlife. The fact that a cosmetic palette was so frequently included in this inventory speaks volumes about its perceived necessity. It was considered as essential as food, drink, and furniture. This wasn't a sentimental gesture, it was a practical and magical provisioning. The Egyptians believed in a literal continuation of life after death, an existence that mirrored the earthly one but was perfected and eternal. In this afterlife, you would still have a body, you would still have a social status to maintain, and you would still face potential spiritual dangers. Therefore, you needed to be able to adorn and protect yourself just as you did in life. The pallet placed in the tomb guaranteed that the individual could continue the daily ritual of applying protective kohl and vibrant eye paint, ensuring their spiritual defenses were active and their appearance reflected their identity for all time. A person buried without their pallet would be as vulnerable and ill-equipped as someone buried without sustenance. This funerary practice creates a fascinating and poignant link across the millennia, connecting us directly to the individuals of the past. When an archaeologist's brush carefully clears the dust from a pallet lying beside a skeleton, we are witnessing a moment of profound intimacy. We are seeing the personal artifact that someone actively chose to take with them on their most important journey. The wear patterns on the grinding surface tell a story of daily use. The slight sheen on the edges speaks of a familiar grip, In some tombs, we find the pallet placed right next to the head of the deceased or nestled within a box alongside other prized possessions like jewelry or inscribed scarabs. This positioning underscores its importance as a primary personal effect. For elite burials, the pallet might be a masterpiece of carving made from exotic materials, a final display of wealth and status meant to impress the gods and other spirits in the afterlife. In more humble graves, it is a simple, functional slab of slate, but its presence is no less significant. In both cases, it represents a universal human desire to face the great unknown prepared, protected, and looking one's best, a hope that resonates as powerfully today as it did 5,000 years ago. While the rituals of adornment connected every Egyptian to the gods, the tools they used told a very different, very human story, one of social status, wealth, and the deep divisions that structured their society. The cosmetic palette, as a universal object, provides a perfect lens to see the stark contrast between the life of a common laborer and that of a courtly noble. For the vast majority of Egyptians, the farmers, the brickmakers, the weavers, their makeup kit was an exercise in pure, unadorned functionality. Imagine a field worker reaching for their palette at the start of the day. It was likely a simple, unshaped fragment of easily available slate or limestone, perhaps broken from a larger piece and only roughly smoothed at the edges. There was no time for intricate carving. This was a tool for speed and necessity. The grinding surface might be deeply worn from daily use, and it probably had no decorative pigment wells. Instead, a single color, most likely the essential protective kohl, would be prepared directly on the main surface. These palettes were small, portable, and purely practical, reflecting a life where the spiritual and medicinal benefits of cosmetics were crucial, but where aesthetics and luxury were distant concerns. They are the artifacts of a working class, tools for survival in both the physical and spiritual realms, and they speak to a life lived close to the earth, using what was immediately at hand. Now transport yourself to a royal palace or the villa of a high-ranking official. Here, the cosmetic palette was transformed from a simple tool into a breathtaking work of art and a powerful status symbol. For the elite, the very material of the palette was a declaration of wealth and access. Instead of common local slate, a noble's palette might be exquisitely carved from imported, costly stones like blue-veined lapis lazuli from distant Afghanistan, deep red carnelian, or translucent alabaster that glowed in the sunlight. The most prestigious were crafted from ivory, sourced from the tusks of elephants or hippopotamuses, a material that was both rare and difficult to work. The shape was no longer a simple rectangle, it was a masterpiece of the carver's art, perhaps taking the form of a gracefully coiled gazelle or a swimming fish with meticulously incised scales. The central grinding area remained, but it was often framed by elaborate scenes. A noble's palette might be inscribed with their name and titles in elegant hieroglyphs, a permanent record of ownership and rank. Some were even inlaid with specks of gold or semi-precious stones, catching the light and announcing to anyone who saw it that its owner moved in the highest circles of power. This material distinction was just the beginning. The very act of using these palettes highlighted the gulf between the classes. For a commoner, the ritual was a solitary, hurried moment of self-preparation. For a noblewoman in the royal court, the application of makeup was often a social event, assisted by servants. She would not grind her own pigments. A servant or a dedicated cosmetician would perform that task for her, using her lavish palette and pestle. This act of delegation was, in itself, a display of status. It signaled that she had the leisure time and the wealth to have others perform manual labor for her, even in something as personal as her toilette. The palette in this context was not just a functional object, but a centerpiece of a sophisticated vanity set that might include a polished silver mirror, intricate cosmetic spoons, and an array of small pots and jars made of faience, glass, or alabaster to store pre-mixed unguents and perfumes. The entire ensemble was a performance of elite identity, reinforcing social hierarchies even in the most private of chambers. Ultimately, these contrasting objects reveal a profound truth about ancient Egypt. The quest for divine protection and good health was universal, but the experience of daily life was anything but equal. The humble, worn slate palette of a farmer and the gleaming ivory masterpiece of a princess served the same core spiritual and practical functions. Both were used to create the kohl that warded off evil and eye infections. Both connected their users to the gods, yet one was an anonymous tool while the other was a personalized heirloom. This duality is what makes these artifacts so compelling. They show us a society where everyone, from the lowest laborer to the pharaoh himself, participated in a shared cultural practice, yet that same practice was also used to visibly reinforce and display the immense social distance between them. When we look at these palettes side by side in a museum case, we are not just looking at different styles of art, we are witnessing the material evidence of a stratified world, where your access to beauty, luxury, and even the finest forms of divine protection was determined by the station you were born into. This remarkable fusion of spiritual belief and practical benefit finds its most stunning validation in the very medical texts of the ancient Egyptians themselves. While we've seen how their mythology provided a framework for understanding protection, they were also meticulous scientists and physicians who documented their knowledge with incredible precision. Several magnificent medical papyri have survived, and among them, the Ebers Papyrus stands as a colossal encyclopedia of ancient healing. Dated to around 1550 BC, this sprawling scroll is a treasure trove of remedies for everything from headaches to heart conditions, and it contains explicit, detailed prescriptions for the eyes. The text doesn't just say, use kohl, it provides specific, complex recipes. It instructs the physician to create medicinal eye paints by combining lead-based minerals like galena with other ingredients such as ochre, malachite, or even substances like frankincense and myrrh, ground together in specific proportions. These were not vague suggestions, they were formulated treatments, carefully recorded and passed down through generations of healers. This proves that the Egyptians were fully aware of the therapeutic properties of their cosmetics. They weren't just applying a magical charm, they were administering a documented pharmaceutical preparation, turning the cosmetic palette into a genuine apothecary's mortar and pestle. For a long time, modern scholars looked at these lead-based recipes with deep skepticism, viewing them through the lens of our contemporary understanding of lead poisoning. It seemed like a dangerous, even foolish, practice. How could applying a known toxin directly to the eyes possibly be beneficial? This is where modern science stepped in to unravel the ancient mystery, and the findings were nothing short of revolutionary. In the early 21st century, French researchers decided to put the Egyptian prescriptions to the test using advanced biochemical analysis. They discovered that the very low doses of lead salts found in kohl, when applied to the skin, did something extraordinary. They triggered a biochemical reaction in the cells, stimulating the production of nitric oxide. Now, nitric oxide is a crucial signaling molecule in our bodies, and one of its primary roles is to kick the immune system into high gear. This gentle, constant stimulation right at the application site acted like a permanent, low-level alarm system, rallying the body's natural defenses and creating a powerful antibacterial environment around the vulnerable eye tissue. The Egyptians, through centuries of observation and experimentation, had accidentally developed a highly effective, topical immune booster. This scientific confirmation transforms our understanding of their daily ritual from a matter of faith into a triumph of empirical wisdom. The Egyptians lived in an environment where eye infections were a constant threat. Dust storms from the desert, bacteria-laden water from the Nile, and crowded living conditions made conditions like trachoma, a painful, infectious disease that can lead to blindness, a common affliction. Their solution was elegantly multi-layered. The physical paste, with its thick, oily base, created a literal barrier, trapping dust and debris before they could irritate the eye. The galena mineral, with its dark, reflective properties, cut the sun's glare, reducing squinting and eye strain, and now we know that on a microscopic, cellular level, the lead compounds were actively marshaling the body's immune cells to patrol the area and fight off invading pathogens. They had developed a single, elegant treatment that was simultaneously a physical shield, a pair of sunglasses, and a medicinal cream. This wasn't a lucky guess. It was the result of a culture that paid exquisite attention to the results of their practices over generations, refining their recipes until they achieved a formula that genuinely worked. So, the next time you see that iconic image of an Egyptian with their dramatic, lined eyes, see it not just as art or fashion, but as a testament to a sophisticated medical understanding that was thousands of years ahead of its time. The humble makeup palette was the tool that made this advanced preventative health care possible for everyone, from the pharaoh to the peasant. It represents a world where there was no artificial division between the pharmacy and the home, between the spiritual and the scientific. In grinding their coal, they were engaging in an act that satisfied their soul's need for divine protection and their body's need for physiological defense in one beautiful, continuous motion. They may have explained its efficacy through the myth of Horus, but their practical, observable results led them to a medical truth that modern biochemistry has only just begun to appreciate. It's a profound reminder that ancient wisdom often contains layers of insight we are still working to decode, and that the most enduring solutions are often those that address the whole human being, body, mind, and spirit. But the world of the Egyptian palette extended far beyond the vibrant greens and blacks of eye paint into an invisible yet equally vital realm of sensation, the world of scent. Picture this: on that same smooth, grinding surface, alongside the malachite and galena, you might find a lump of fragrant resin like frankincense or myrrh, or perhaps a piece of aromatic wood. With the same deliberate, grinding motion, these precious materials would be pulverized into a fine powder, but instead of being mixed with water, they were meticulously blended with rich oils or animal fats. This process transformed the palette into a perfumer's workstation, creating luxurious unguents and scented creams that were an essential part of daily life and spiritual practice. In the intense heat of the Nile Valley, where personal cleanliness was both a physical comfort and a religious imperative, these fragrant concoctions were not a mere indulgence, they were a fundamental tool for well-being, a way to anoint the body and connect with the divine through the very air one breathed. This obsession with personal scent was deeply rooted in both practicality and profound religious belief. The Egyptians lived in a climate where sweating was a constant reality, and hygiene was a serious concern. Washing with water was common, but to combat odor and to leave a pleasing fragrance on the skin, they turned to these oil-based unguents. The fats, often from cattle or goats, would be purified and then infused with the ground aromatics, creating a perfumed balm that could be slathered over the body after bathing. This served as a primitive but effective deodorant and moisturizer, protecting the skin from the harsh, dry sun and desert winds, but the significance soared far beyond the physical. The Egyptians believed that the gods themselves were drawn to beautiful smells, temples were filled with the smoke of burning incense, and rituals often involved anointing statues of the deities with the finest perfumed oils. By wearing these same sacred scents, an individual was making their body a fit vessel for divine presence, aligning their own personal aroma with the very fragrance of the gods. To be clean and sweet-smelling was to be in a state of ritual purity, worthy of interacting with both society and the spiritual world. The ingredients they used read like a treasure map of the ancient world, revealing extensive and sophisticated trade networks. Frankincense and myrrh, two of the most prized resins, were not native to Egypt. They had to be imported from the distant land of Punt, likely located in the Horn of Africa. Expeditions to Punt were state-sponsored missions of immense importance, akin to voyages for gold or ebony. Other coveted aromatics included cinnamon, which came from even farther afield in Southeast Asia, and cedar oil from the forests of Lebanon. The act of grinding these rare, expensive materials on a personal palate was therefore another powerful statement of status. A noble or royal individual wasn't just applying a pleasant smell, they were anointing themselves with the essence of empire, wearing a scent that spoke of pharaonic power, far-reaching trade routes, and access to the world's most exclusive commodities. The palate in this context became a crucible where global wealth was transformed into personal and spiritual capital. The application of these scented unguents was its own kind of ritual, deeply interwoven with the concepts of health and magic. Just as kohl was believed to have medicinal properties, many fragrant resins were valued for their antiseptic and anti-inflammatory effects. Myrrh, for instance, was known for its healing qualities and was used in salves for wounds. By grinding it into a balm, they were creating a therapeutic skin treatment. Furthermore, specific scents were thought to have magical protective qualities. Lily and lotus flower fragrances were associated with rebirth and were commonly used in funerary contexts, ensuring the deceased would be welcomed into the afterlife with a pleasing aroma. The very act of anointing was magical. It was a way of sealing the body, of making it sacred and protected. So, when an Egyptian used their palate to prepare a perfumed unguent, they were engaging in an act that combined dermatological care, social climbing, and spiritual invocation, all emanating from the quiet, rhythmic scrape of a pestle on stone. This concept of makeup as spiritual armor becomes even more powerful when we understand the ancient Egyptian view of the human body itself. They perceived the body not as a sealed container, but as a permeable entity full of potential entry points for malevolent forces. They believed that hostile spirits, demons, and the curses of enemies could physically invade a person through their bodily orifices. The eyes, as wide open windows to the world, were considered particularly vulnerable gateways. Think of how easily dust or a small insect can cause irritation. In their worldview, this was a physical manifestation of a spiritual attack. A sudden illness, a bout of blindness, or a stroke of bad luck could all be explained by an invisible, malevolent entity slipping inside through the eyes, ears, nose, or mouth. In this context, daily life was a constant, low-grade spiritual battle, and the body's defenses needed to be fortified every single morning. This is where the dark kohl liner transformed from a symbolic gesture into a literal, physical barricade. When an Egyptian carefully applied that thick, black paste around their eyes, they were doing much more than invoking the god Horus. They were constructing a magical wall. The heavy, opaque line was believed to function as a spiritual seal, closing off those vulnerable portals to invasion. It was a form of sympathetic magic. The visual solidity of the kohl suggested an impenetrable barrier, one that evil spirits could not cross. This practice finds a fascinating parallel in other cultures that used apotropaic magic intended to ward off evil, often involving the color blue or black to confuse and deter harmful spirits. For the Egyptians, the kohl was that same kind of deterrent, a daily anointing that made the body a fortress. This wasn't a vague hope, it was a practical, applied defense strategy, as routine and essential as locking your door at night. This belief in the body's vulnerability made the inclusion of cosmetics in tombs an absolute, non-negotiable necessity for the journey to the afterlife. The Egyptians envisioned the afterlife not as a serene, cloud-filled paradise, but as a dangerous, arduous voyage through a dark and treacherous underworld, the Jewat. This realm was populated by demons, treacherous gates, and lakes of fire, all of which the deceased soul had to navigate successfully to reach the paradise of the Field of Reeds. In this perilous landscape, the deceased was more exposed than ever. Their spiritual body was still susceptible to those same hostile forces that threatened them in life, and the consequences of an invasion now were eternal. A spirit entering through the eye could cause not just temporary blindness, but the complete annihilation of the soul. Therefore, being buried without your cosmetic palette and a supply of coal would be like embarking on the most dangerous expedition of your existence without any weapons or armor. So, the palette placed in the tomb was not a sentimental memento, it was critical survival gear. It guaranteed that the individual could continue the protective ritual for all eternity, reapplying their spiritual armor as needed to face the endless challenges of the afterlife. This explains why we find these palettes across all social classes. A pharaoh might be buried with a golden palette inlaid with lapis lazuli, while a common farmer had a simple, worn slate slab, but the fundamental purpose was identical: eternal protection. In some burials, the palette is found clutched in the hand of the deceased or placed right beside the head, positioned for immediate use upon awakening in the next world. This practice underscores a profound and universal human desire for safety in the face of the unknown. The Egyptians, with their intricate beliefs, found a way to grant that security through a simple, elegant object, ensuring that every individual, in death as in life, could face the darkness with their defenses firmly in place. The reach of the Egyptian cosmetic palette, however, extended far beyond the banks of the Nile, its influence rippling out across the ancient world through bustling trade routes and cultural exchange. The relentless demand for specific minerals like galena and malachite transformed these cosmetic ingredients into powerful economic engines, driving international relations and funding vast, state-sponsored expeditions. To secure the deep green malachite, the Egyptians established massive mining operations in the Sinai Peninsula, carving out tunnels and setting up fortified settlements in the arid landscape to protect the valuable copper ore from which malachite forms. These were not small-scale ventures, they were industrial enterprises, complete with administrative buildings, barracks for soldiers, and temples dedicated to the goddess Hathor, who was revered as the divine patroness of these mining regions. The turquoise, often found alongside the malachite, became another coveted export, but it was the vibrant green pigment that the elite craved for its connection to Osiris and eternal life. This demand created a constant flow of goods and people between the Nile Valley and Sinai, binding the two regions in a tight economic and cultural embrace for centuries. Simultaneously, to the south, the quest for the perfect black coal led to deep and complex interactions with the land of Nubia. The mineral galena was mined in the eastern desert regions, but Nubia was a critical source for other prized materials, including gold and ebony. Egyptian pharaohs would launch military campaigns and trading missions deep into Nubia, not only to acquire these raw materials, but also to establish control over the trade routes themselves. The exchange wasn't always peaceful. It was often a relationship of conquest and subjugation, with Egypt building massive fortresses along the Nile to secure its economic interests. Yet, this interaction also led to a profound cultural fusion. Nubians adopted Egyptian gods and burial customs, and they also embraced the use of coal, adapting it into their own artistic and cosmetic traditions. In return, Egyptian art began to feature Nubian motifs and styles, a clear indication that influence flowed in both directions. The cosmetic palette, therefore, sat at the center of a vast geopolitical network, its contents fueling empire building and creating a complex web of dependency and cultural exchange that stretched from the deserts of the Sinai to the heart of Africa. This Egyptian aesthetic, particularly the dramatic, kohl-rimmed eye, did not remain confined to its homeland. As Egypt's power and prestige grew, its cultural exports became highly desirable symbols of sophistication and ancient wisdom throughout the Mediterranean world. When the Greeks began interacting with Egypt more frequently, starting around the 7th century BC, they were captivated by this advanced civilization they considered older and wiser. Greek historians like Herodotus wrote with fascination about Egyptian customs, explicitly mentioning their universal use of makeup. The Greeks adopted the practice of using kohl, but they infused it with their own cultural meanings. While the Egyptians saw it as a form of divine protection, the Greeks often viewed it through a lens of aesthetics and vanity. In Greek theater, actors wore heavy kohl to accentuate their eyes and express emotion to audiences in large amphitheaters, a practical application that borrowed the technique but stripped away much of its spiritual significance. This adaptation shows how a deeply religious practice in one culture can be transformed into a primarily artistic or social convention in another, even while the physical act of application remained strikingly similar. The pattern of adoption and adaptation continued powerfully under the Roman Empire. The Romans, who absorbed and repurposed elements from every culture they conquered, developed a deep fascination with Egypt, especially following the absorption of the Ptolemaic kingdom. Egyptian-style cosmetics became immensely fashionable in Rome, but with a distinct Roman twist. Roman women used kohl, which they called lomentum, but they also prized other Egyptian-inspired beauty treatments, such as creams made from crushed ostrich eggs and perfumes based on Nile lotus. However, the Roman approach was often more overtly commercial and less spiritually grounded. They established factories for producing cosmetics on an industrial scale, moving the production out of the home and into the marketplace. While an Egyptian might grind their own kohl on a personal palette as a daily ritual, a wealthy Roman matron would likely purchase her makeup pre-made from a shop. The object itself changed too. The simple, symbolic stone palette was largely replaced by elaborate glass and bronze containers. The Romans took the Egyptian concept of adornment and industrialized it, turning what was once a personal, meditative act of faith into a commodity of luxury and status within their own vast consumer economy. This global journey of the Egyptian cosmetic ideal reveals a fundamental truth about cultural exchange in the ancient world. A practice that began as a multifaceted solution to environmental, medical, and spiritual needs along the Nile was exported as a prestigious fashion statement. Other civilizations eagerly adopted the look because of Egypt's immense cultural cachet, but they often filtered out the core beliefs that gave it meaning. They saw the powerful almond-shaped eyes in Egyptian statues and wanted to emulate that beauty and authority, but without necessarily understanding or believing in the protective magic of the Wedjat eye. This is a process we see throughout history. A symbol travels, but its original context often gets lost in translation. The Greeks and Romans admired the effect, but for them, it was more about conforming to an aesthetic standard of beauty and displaying one's worldliness than it was about warding off evil spirits. The physical practice spread far and wide, but the soul of the ritual, the intimate connection to Horus and the daily reaffirmation of cosmic order, remained uniquely and profoundly Egyptian, a quiet, spiritual core within a globally traded commodity. When we move beyond the animal forms and grand ceremonial narratives, we find another layer of personalization etched directly into the stone, the intricate world of inscriptions and symbolic iconography. On a personal palette, the presence of hieroglyphs transforms it from a generic tool into a named, bespoke possession. Imagine discovering a palette with a few neatly carved characters along its edge. They might spell out a name like Nefret, meaning the beautiful one, or a title such as Overseer of the Granaries. This simple act of inscribing a name was powerful. It declared ownership, certainly, but it did more than that. It anchored the object to a specific individual, ensuring that its protective and beautifying powers were directed solely to them. In a culture deeply concerned with the eternal preservation of one's identity, having your name carved into an object you would use forever, both in life and in the afterlife, was a way of securing your very self against oblivion. It was a permanent claim, a whisper of a particular person's existence that has managed to survive thousands of years. These inscriptions could also take the form of short prayers or dedications to a god, turning the palette into a direct line of communication with the divine. A phrase like "an offering given by the king to Osiris" or "May Hathor give life to the owner's name" was not merely decorative text, it was a perpetual prayer. Every time the owner used that palette, they were reactivating that request for divine favor. It embedded a spiritual function directly into the object's purpose, blending the practical act of grinding cosmetics with a continuous, low-level ritual of worship and supplication. For the elite, these inscriptions were also a subtle display of literacy and access to skilled artisans who could carve such precise, miniature hieroglyphs. It elevated the palette from a common commodity to a custom-made sacred object, reflecting the owner's piety, status, and education all at once. Beyond text, the surfaces of many palettes are adorned with a rich vocabulary of symbolic motifs, each one a compact packet of cultural and spiritual meaning. One of the most universal is the Ankh, the iconic looped cross symbol that represents life and the breath of life. When this symbol appears on a palette, perhaps carved near the grinding surface, it imbues the entire cosmetic process with the power of life itself. The act of creating and applying makeup becomes an act of invigorating the body, of charging it with vitality. It connects the user to the life-giving forces of the gods and the universe, suggesting that the palette is not just for adornment, but for sustaining one's essential energy and ensuring it continues into the afterlife. Another profound symbol is the Djed pillar, a stylized representation of a tree trunk with crossbars that symbolizes stability, endurance, and the backbone of the god Osiris. Its presence on a cosmetic palette is incredibly significant. In a world where chaos was a constant threat, the Djed pillar represented an unshakable foundation. To have this symbol on an object used daily was to actively reinforce one's own personal stability and resilience. It was a magical anchor, a promise of endurance through the trials of life and the perils of the afterlife. The very act of grinding pigments on a surface marked with the Djed could be seen as a ritual of strengthening one's own spiritual backbone, of aligning oneself with the enduring power of the resurrected Osiris. Then we have the beautiful and ever-present lotus flower. In Egyptian mythology, the lotus emerges each morning from the primordial waters, opening its petals to the sun, and thus became a powerful symbol of rebirth, creation, and the sun itself. When a lotus motif is carved onto a palette, it ties the cosmetic ritual directly to this daily cycle of cosmic renewal. Applying makeup in the morning, using a tool decorated with the lotus, mirrors the flower's own opening. It becomes a personal recreation of the dawn, a daily rebirth for the user. This symbolism is particularly poignant in a funerary context. A palette placed in a tomb and inscribed with lotus flowers carries the powerful hope that the deceased will experience a similar rebirth, emerging from the darkness of the tomb into the radiant light of the afterlife, just as the lotus emerges from the murky waters. Other common motifs add further layers of nuance. The Shen ring, a circle of rope tied at the bottom, symbolizes eternity and protection. Enclosing a name within a Shen ring on a palette was a way of magically protecting that person's identity and existence for all time. Scenes of papyrus and lotus plants intertwined often represent the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, but on a personal level, they can symbolize harmony and the balanced interplay of opposing forces within one's own life. Even the simple zigzag line, representing water, connects the palette to the life-giving, purifying power of the Nile. Each of these symbols was not just pretty decoration, they were functional components of the object's magical efficacy. They were chosen deliberately to amplify the palette's purpose, layering the act of cosmetic application with specific intentions for protection, stability, rebirth, and eternal life, making every use a deeply personalized and spiritually charged event. That iconic, dramatic Egyptian eye, with its bold lines and mesmerizing elongation, never truly vanished from our collective imagination. Its power has echoed through the centuries, resurfacing again and again as a timeless symbol of mystique, drama, and unparalleled glamour. This ancient aesthetic found one of its most spectacular modern revivals in the golden age of Hollywood, when silver screen legends looked to the past to create icons for the future. Think of the breathtaking Elizabeth Taylor in the 1963 film Cleopatra. Her portrayal of the last pharaoh of Egypt was not just a performance, it was a cultural phenomenon that single-handedly cemented the Cleopatra look in the modern beauty lexicon. The makeup artists working under the legendary Alberto de Rossi meticulously studied ancient Egyptian art to recreate the precise, geometric lines, the thick bands of kohl surrounding the eyes, extended outwards in sharp, sweeping wings, and the strongly defined, arched eyebrows. Taylor's stunning violet eyes, framed by that intense, dark liner, became an unforgettable image, proving that a beauty standard forged thousands of years ago could still captivate a 20th century audience and define an era's idea of exotic, powerful femininity. But this revival was far from a one-time event. The Egyptian influence has continuously pulsed through the veins of high fashion and popular culture, constantly being reinterpreted and reinvented. In the late 1960s and 70s, designers and makeup artists embraced a new kind of exoticism and boldness, and the Egyptian eye found a perfect home. Supermodel Twiggy popularized a mod, graphic version with heavily drawn lower lashes and an exaggerated wing that, while stylized, shared a direct lineage with the ancient emphasis on enlarging and defining the eye. Then, fast forward to the late 1990s, when French luxury brand Yves Saint Laurent presented a collection that featured models with gilded skin and strikingly heavy, black, kohl-rimmed eyes, directly channeling the opulence of a pharaoh's court. This high-fashion endorsement signaled that the look was not just a costume, but a serious artistic statement. In the 2000s, celebrities like Beyoncé, with her alter ego Sasha Fierce, and the daring singer Amy Winehouse, with her signature thick, winged liner, each put their own unique spin on the aesthetic. Beyoncé's version was polished, powerful, and regal, while Winehouse's was a more personal, exaggerated, and rock and roll tribute. Both, however, drew from the same ancient well of inspiration, using the bold lines to project confidence, intensity, and a touch of the otherworldly. So, what is it about this specific look that gives it such incredible staying power across millennia? The answer lies in its fundamental perfection of a universal principle of beauty and its powerful psychological impact. The core geometry of the Egyptian eye makeup is designed to do one thing flawlessly: to highlight and accentuate the natural shape of the eye, making it appear larger, more almond-shaped, and intensely expressive. The dark liner makes the whites of the eyes appear brighter and the iris more vibrant, a trick that photographers and makeup artists still rely on today. But beyond the mere physics of perception, the look carries an undeniable aura. It conveys strength, mystery, and an unshakable confidence. When you wear a strong, clean wing of eyeliner, you are putting on a mask of power. It's a modern-day version of divine protection, not against evil spirits, perhaps, but against insecurity and anonymity. It commands attention and suggests a person who is in control, who has a bold and defined presence. This transformative power is exactly what the ancient Egyptians understood. They knew that adorning the eye wasn't just about decoration, it was about crafting an identity and projecting it to the world. Today, the legacy of the Egyptian palette is not confined to the catwalk or the red carpet. It lives on in the most personal of modern rituals. Every time someone reaches for a felt-tip liquid eyeliner pen to create a perfect, sharp wing, they are participating in a tradition that stretches back to the banks of the Nile. Our contemporary cosmetic aisles are filled with the direct descendants of those ancient tools, that sleek, black pencil of kohl you can buy at any drugstore. Its very name pays homage to the mezdemit used by the ancients. Our vibrant green and gold eyeshadows are the modern, sparkly equivalents of the malachite and ochre once ground on stone palettes. And the act itself, of carefully applying liner to define and protect our gaze, remains a potent form of self-expression and preparation for the world. We may have swapped slate for silicone applicators and galena for safe, synthetic pigments, but the fundamental human desire remains unchanged: to enhance our features, to project confidence, and to connect with a sense of history and artistry every single day. The Egyptian makeup palette, in its essence, never went away. It simply evolved, proving that true beauty and the powerful tools we use to achieve it are truly timeless. Today, we possess a powerful new lens to peer into these ancient cosmetic kits, moving beyond educated guesses into the realm of scientific certainty. The proof is no longer just in the carved stone or the artistic depictions, it's in the microscopic residues clinging to these artifact surfaces. Modern archaeology has teamed up with cutting-edge forensic science to perform what is essentially a chemical autopsy on these palettes, allowing us to read the recipes that were ground into them thousands of years ago. The process begins in the field, where archaeologists use incredibly fine tools to carefully collect the tiny, often discolored specks of powder they find in the pigment wells or smeared across the grinding surface. These precious samples, sometimes no larger than a grain of sand, are then sealed in sterile containers, their journey from an Egyptian tomb to a sophisticated laboratory about to begin. Once in the lab, these ancient residues meet a suite of powerful analytical instruments. One of the most important tools is the scanning electron microscope, or SEM. This doesn't just magnify the sample, it bombards it with a focused beam of electrons, revealing a breathtaking world of detail at magnifications of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of times. Scientists can see the actual shape and size of the individual mineral particles, which can tell them how finely the cosmetic was ground and sometimes even hint at the grinding technique used. But the real magic happens when the SEM is coupled with an energy dispersive X-ray spectrometer, or EDS. This attachment analyzes the unique X-rays that the sample emits when hit by the electron beam. Every chemical element has its own X-ray signature, so the EDS system can create a precise map of the sample's elemental composition, instantly revealing the presence of lead, copper, oxygen, sulfur, and other key components. To go even deeper and understand the exact mineral compounds present, researchers turn to a technique called X-ray diffraction, or XRD. While SEM-EDS tells us what elements are there, XRD reveals how those atoms are arranged into specific crystalline structures. In this process, the ancient powder is exposed to a beam of X-rays. As the X-rays pass through the crystal lattice of the minerals, they diffract or bend in unique patterns that act like a fingerprint. By analyzing this diffraction pattern, scientists can identify the exact mineral. This is how they can definitively distinguish between galena for coal and other dark minerals, or confirm that a green residue is indeed malachite and not some other copper-based compound. It's a truly brilliant method that effectively allows us to look at the atomic blueprint of the Egyptians' cosmetics. The results of this high-tech detective work have been nothing short of revolutionary, confirming long-held theories and uncovering stunning surprises. Analysis has overwhelmingly verified the widespread use of galena for the classic black coal and malachite for green eye paint, but it has also identified more complex recipes. Scientists have found traces of other minerals mixed in, such as cerussite and laurionite, which are other lead-based compounds. The presence of these specific substances shows that the Egyptians weren't just grinding raw ore. They were intentionally creating synthetic minerals through sophisticated chemistry, perhaps by treating galena with salt water to produce these brighter, white lead compounds that could be mixed to create different shades and consistencies. This proves they had a surprisingly advanced understanding of chemical synthesis. Furthermore, this forensic analysis has detected the presence of rare and exotic ingredients that speak to the vast trade networks of the ancient world. In some residues, researchers have identified traces of frankincense and myrrh, resins that had to be imported from the distant land of Punt. Finding these in a cosmetic context confirms that perfumed unguents were indeed prepared on the same palettes as eye makeup, blending scent and color into a single, multi-sensory experience. In other cases, analysis has revealed the use of rare earth elements or specific clays that could only have come from particular, far-flung geographical locations. This turns a simple cosmetic residue into a data point on an ancient map, tracing the incredible journeys of raw materials across deserts and seas to end up on the face of an Egyptian noble. It provides irrefutable, physical evidence that the contents of these humble palettes were as globally connected as the civilization that created them. And now, let's bridge the gap between ancient history and the modern world by bringing this iconic look to life right before our eyes. To truly understand the artistry and effort involved, I collaborated with a historical makeup artist to recreate the classic Egyptian style using methods as authentic as possible. We're going to follow the entire process, from raw mineral to finished face, using a beautiful handcrafted replica of an ancient slate palette. This isn't just about applying makeup, it's about experiencing a 3,000-year-old ritual, feeling the texture of the stones, and witnessing the transformation firsthand. We begin with the very foundation of the look, the legendary coal. Our artist selects a raw, glittering piece of galena, the same lead sulfide ore the Egyptians prized. Holding the smooth, rounded pestle, she places the dark gray nugget onto the central grinding surface of the palette. The first scrape of stone against stone is a gritty, resonant sound, a direct echo of countless mornings along the Nile. She adds a few drops of scented oil frankincense, in this case, to stay true to the period, which immediately changes the consistency, binding the powder and releasing a rich, earthy aroma. The grinding is rhythmic and deliberate. This isn't a quick process. Back and forth in a circular motion, she works the pestle, slowly breaking down the coarse mineral into a finer and finer powder. You can see the transformation happening under her hand, the rough rock yielding to become a smooth, creamy, jet black paste. This act alone is a powerful reminder that every application of coal in ancient times was preceded by this quiet, focused, almost meditative labor. With the coal prepared, the application begins. Our artist uses a slender, hand-carved wooden stick, much like the ones found in archaeological digs. Dipping the tip into the freshly made paste, she leans toward the mirror. The first stroke is a clean, solid line right along the upper lash line, tracing the natural curve of the eyelid. But she doesn't stop there. The true signature of the Egyptian look is the elongation. With a steady hand, she extends that line outwards and upwards, sweeping it dramatically toward the temple, creating that iconic almond-shaped frame. She then repeats the process along the lower lash line, connecting it to the wing and filling in the entire space between the lashes and the line. The result is immediate and striking. The eye is instantly enlarged, defined, and possessed of an intense magnetic gaze. It's not a subtle effect, it's bold, graphic, and incredibly powerful. You can immediately see how this style would cut the sun's glare, and there's an undeniable aura of strength and mystique that comes with it. It's fascinating to observe how this single element completely transforms the expression, bringing a piece of ancient art to life on a modern face. Next, we move to the vibrant color that represented life and resurrection, the green from malachite. Our artist takes a small, rough chunk of the brilliant green copper ore and places it on a clean part of the palette. The grinding process begins again, but the malachite has a different texture, creating a lighter, brighter green powder. Mixed with a little oil, it becomes a vivid paste. Using her finger, she then applies this generous wash of green across the entire mobile eyelid, from the lash line all the way up to the brow bone in some classic depictions. The effect is stunning. The vibrant green pops dramatically against the skin, and when paired with the strong black kohl, it creates a breathtaking contrast that is both artistic and deeply symbolic. It's easy to imagine how this color would have shimmered in the bright Egyptian sun, a living emblem of the fertile Nile and the promise of eternal life. To complete the look, we add a touch of red ochre, ground from an earthy red clay, to stain the lips and cheeks, bringing a flush of vitality and health to the face, just as the Egyptians did. The final result is nothing short of transformative. The modern face is now a canvas for an ancient ideal of beauty, power, and spirituality, but experiencing this process firsthand reveals so much more than just the visual outcome. You gain a profound appreciation for the skill involved, the steady hand needed to create those perfect, symmetrical lines, and the time and patience required for the entire ritual. This wasn't a 5-minute makeup routine, it was a dedicated ceremony. You also develop a tangible connection to the people of the past, feeling the weight of the palette in your hand, hearing the scrape of the pestle, and smelling the fragrant oils makes history feel immediate and real. It underscores that these were not abstract figures in tomb paintings, they were individuals who began their days with this same sensory experience, using these same motions to prepare themselves to face the world, armed with divine protection and a powerful sense of identity. Seeing the look completed, you understand that it was far more than cosmetic. It was a complete and elegant system of belief, medicine, and art, all masterfully contained within the elegant confines of a simple stone palette. Yet, for all our admiration of their sophisticated solutions, we must also confront a more troubling side to this ancient practice, one that sparks genuine debate among scholars and health experts today. While we've celebrated the antibacterial properties of their lead-based kohl, a stark, modern question emerges: at what cost did this protection come? We now understand with chilling clarity that lead is a potent neurotoxin, and chronic exposure, especially through a mucous membrane like the eye, can lead to a host of devastating health problems, including neurological damage, abdominal pain, and even infertility. This creates a difficult paradox. The very substance that provided a daily, low-level immune boost against infection may have simultaneously been slowly poisoning the population over a lifetime of use. Some researchers point to the sometimes irrational behavior of certain pharaohs described in historical records and wonder if lead poisoning could have been a contributing factor, a silent, invisible plague born from their quest for protection. It forces us to reevaluate the narrative, to see this brilliant adaptation not as a perfect solution, but as a tragic compromise, a reminder that even the most ingenious ancient technologies carried hidden dangers they could not possibly have comprehended. Adding further nuance to this debate is the ongoing scholarly discussion about the multifaceted purpose of this iconic makeup. Was it purely a spiritual shield and a medical salve, or did it also function as a powerful tool of seduction and social communication? The ancient Egyptians lived in a world where the sacred and the sensual were often intertwined, not separate. The same heavy kohl that invoked the protection of Horus also dramatically enhanced the appearance of the eyes, making them appear larger, more luminous, and intensely arresting. Deities like Hathor were simultaneously goddesses of love, beauty, and music, as well as protective figures. It is not a stretch to imagine that the makeup worn in her honor served multiple, overlapping purposes. The elaborate, elongated lines could very well have been a socially accepted and highly sophisticated form of erotic signaling, a way to draw attention to the face, to emphasize the act of looking and being looked at. In a culture that valued order and harmony, this wouldn't have been considered vulgar. It was likely seen as another natural expression of life force and attractiveness, a celebration of human beauty within a divinely ordered world. We can find compelling evidence for this dual purpose in their own literature and art. Love poetry from the New Kingdom is filled with lush, physical descriptions where lovers praise each other's bodies, and the eyes are frequently a central focus of this admiration. While the poems don't explicitly mention kohl, the cultural association between beautifully adorned eyes and desirability is strongly implied. Furthermore, the cosmetic kits found in tombs often include not just palettes and kohl pots, but also mirrors of polished bronze or silver, and delicate cosmetic spoons carved into the shapes of swimming girls or graceful animals. These objects, intimately connected to the beauty ritual, suggest a powerful element of self-awareness and the pleasure of self-adornment. The ritual, therefore, becomes a complex tapestry woven from multiple threads: the urgent need for spiritual and physical protection, the desire to display social status, and the innate human impulse to enhance one's appearance to attract a mate and experience the joys of sensual life. To reduce it to just one of these functions is to overlook the rich, complicated, and fully human reality of the people who practiced it every day. This layered understanding ultimately enriches our connection to the past, moving us beyond a simplistic view of the Egyptians as merely pious or pragmatic. It reveals them to be as complex and contradictory as we are, navigating a world of competing needs and desires. They sought to ward off death while simultaneously embracing the pleasures of life. They developed a medical treatment that was both brilliantly effective and subtly toxic. They created a symbol of divine power that also served as a marker of human allure. This complexity doesn't diminish their achievements, it makes them more relatable. It shows us that their search for balance between protection and poison, between the sacred and the sensual, between the needs of the body and the longings of the soul, was a central drama of their existence, played out each morning on the small, intimate stage of a stone makeup palette. To truly appreciate these artifacts in all their splendor, let's embark on a virtual tour of the world's great museums where the most exquisite and storied palettes are preserved. Our first stop is the heart of Egypt itself, the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, home to an unparalleled collection that includes some of the most historically significant palettes ever unearthed. Here, you can stand before objects that witnessed the very dawn of Egyptian civilization. While the legendary Narmer palette is a star attraction, the museum holds countless others that are equally telling. One standout is the Two-Dog palette, a magnificent ceremonial piece carved from siltstone. It gets its name from the two powerful canines, likely symbols of strength and loyalty, carved facing each other at the top, their long necks forming the edges of the object. The central grinding well is surrounded by a chaotic, yet beautifully ordered, scene of mythical beasts and conquered enemies. Holding this pallet, you are looking at a masterpiece of early state propaganda, an object that communicated the king's power to subdue chaos and protect the land, making the cosmic struggle for order a tangible reality you can see etched in stone. Crossing the Mediterranean, we find ourselves in the British Museum in London, a treasure trove of Egyptian artifacts that offers a different perspective. Here, the collection allows you to trace the entire evolution of the pallet, from grand ceremonial objects to intimate personal items. A must-see is the Libyan pallet, also known as the Libyan booty pallet. This fascinating artifact is slightly later than the Narmer pallet and tells a more specific story of military triumph and economic gain. Its carvings depict the smiting of foreign foes and, most importantly, the systematic recording of captured livestock, thousands of cattle, donkeys, and sheep, as well as fortified settlements with symbolic walls. This pallet is less about the abstract concept of unification and more about the tangible rewards of conquest, wealth, resources, and the establishment of economic control. It shows us how these objects began to document not just mythological ideals, but actual historical events and administrative successes, marking a shift toward using art as a recorded chronicle of a pharaoh's achievements. Then, travel across the Atlantic to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, where the focus often shines on the artistry and personal luxury of the elite. The Met's collection includes stunning examples of palettes from the peak of Egyptian power, showcasing incredible craftsmanship and materials. You might find a delicate palette carved from blue-glazed steatite in the form of a swimming tilapia fish, its scales meticulously incised and its body curved to fit perfectly in the palm of your hand. Or perhaps you'll encounter one made of polished alabaster, so thin and translucent it seems to glow from within. These objects in the Met tell quieter, more personal stories. They speak of individual wealth, of a love for beautiful things, and of the daily rituals of the courtly elite. The wear marks on their grinding surfaces are subtle, suggesting they were used not for rough daily preparation, but for creating the finest pastes for special occasions, or perhaps were prized possessions intended more for the afterlife than for mundane daily use. Beyond these iconic institutions, other museums hold their own unique gems. The Louvre in Paris, for instance, houses the stunning palette of King Narmer's near contemporary, a piece that offers a slightly different artistic style from the same formative period. And in the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, you can find palettes that highlight the magical, zoomorphic forms we discussed earlier, like a beautifully preserved hippo palette, its stout legs and rounded back showing the gentle wear of countless applications. What's remarkable about viewing these palettes in a museum context is the ability to compare them side by side. You can see the progression from the large, politically charged ceremonial slabs of the pre-dynastic era to the smaller, more refined, and personally symbolic palettes of the Old Kingdom and beyond. This comparative view turns a museum gallery into a visual timeline, allowing you to physically see how Egyptian society evolved from using art to build a state to using it to decorate and protect an individual life. Each of these palettes, behind its glass case, holds a silent story about its original owner. The grand ceremonial palettes like Narmer's were undoubtedly commissioned by the state, owned by the office of the king rather than the man himself. They tell a story of power, ideology, and the need to communicate a unifying message to a diverse population, but the smaller, animal-shaped palettes are different. A fish palette, worn smooth from use, whispers a story of a woman's hope for children and her family's continuity. A hippo palette, placed carefully in a tomb, speaks of a mother's fear and her fervent prayers for protection during the dangerous journey of childbirth. A simple, unadorned slate rectangle tells a tale of a farmer or artisan for whom the ritual was a necessary shield against the sun and disease. a moment of personal empowerment before a long day of labor. These objects connect us not to abstract historical forces, but to individual human experiences, to the universal desires for safety, health, family, and a dignified appearance that transcend the millennia separating us from the people who once held these cherished items in their hands. But to fully appreciate the pallet's role, we must see it not as a solitary object, but as the central piece of a much larger and more elaborate ensemble. Imagine opening an ornate box on an ancient Egyptian dressing table. Inside, you wouldn't find just one item, but a curated collection of tools, each with a specific purpose in a sophisticated ritual of personal care. The pallet was the workshop, but it was supported by a suite of other artifacts that together formed a complete cosmetic and grooming kit, revealing a society that invested tremendous thought and resources into the art of presentation. This collection was a statement of refinement, a practical necessity, and a spiritual practice all rolled into one. One of the most essential companions to the pallet was the mirror. These weren't the silver-backed glass mirrors we know today. They were discs of highly polished metal, typically copper or bronze, mounted on handles that were often themselves works of art. The reflective surface was achieved through meticulous polishing with fine abrasives, creating a shimmering, if slightly wavering, image. The handles tell their own story, frequently carved from wood, ivory, or faience into the form of a papyrus stalk, a graceful goddess like Hathor, or a lithe young woman. To hold one of these mirrors was to grasp a symbol of rebirth and divine favor, as the reflected image was connected to concepts of the soul and the face of a god. Using it to check the precise application of kohl or the placement of a wig was the final, crucial step in the grooming process, ensuring that the spiritual and aesthetic transformation was complete and harmonious. Alongside the palette and mirror, we find some of the most delicate and beautiful objects from the ancient world: cosmetic spoons and containers. These were not crude utensils, but exquisite miniatures of art. Cosmetic spoons, often called swimming girl spoons, were masterpieces of carving. Picture a spoon whose handle is a gracefully swimming nude girl holding a duck or a lotus bloom, with the bowl of the spoon forming the body of the bird or the flower itself. These were used to scoop precious unguents, perfumed oils, and perhaps even the thicker cosmetic pastes from their containers. The containers themselves, known as alabastra, were small, slender vases designed to hold these costly oils. They were crafted from a variety of luxurious materials: alabaster, which kept the contents cool, blue faience, shimmering like the Nile, or even blown glass in later periods. These vessels ensured that the scented oils and unguents used to moisten the skin and mix with pigments remained pure and fragrant, completing the sensory experience of the toilette. The regimen extended far beyond the face. Hair was a major focus of Egyptian grooming for both men and women. Archaeologists have found terracotta and alabaster hair curlers, evidence of elaborate styling techniques. Wigs were immensely popular among the elite, made from human hair or plant fibers like date palm, and were worn not just for fashion, but for hygiene and to denote social status. These wigs were often intricately braided and woven with golden threads and beads of semi-precious stones. Combs, made of wood or ivory with finely spaced teeth, were essential for maintaining both natural hair and these elaborate wigs. Furthermore, personal cleanliness was paramount, linked directly to ritual purity. Both men and women practiced depilation using bronze or copper razors with curved blades, ensuring smooth skin as a mark of civilization and refinement. Pumice stones were used for exfoliation, and a final anointing with perfumed oils from the alabastra would leave the skin smooth, hydrated, and smelling divine. When viewed as a complete set, these objects reveal a holistic philosophy of self-care that is strikingly modern in its comprehensiveness. The Egyptian toilet was a multi-sensory ritual that addressed every aspect of the body. It began with cleansing and shaving, moved to the anointing of the skin with fragrant oils, then to the intricate application of makeup using the palette, and was finalized with the styling of the hair and the donning of a fresh linen garment and jewelry. Each tool had its designated place in this ceremony. The palette's role as the source of color and protection was therefore supported by the mirror's vision, the spoon's precision, the oil jar's nourishment, and the razor's purity. This was not a hurried routine, it was a dedicated investment of time and attention, a daily reaffirmation of one's place in a culture that saw the well-ordered, beautifully presented human form as a mirror of the cosmic order they called Ma'at. The humble makeup palette, therefore, was the vibrant, colorful heart of a much larger and deeply sophisticated system of personal adornment and spiritual preparation. And while the Egyptian palette stands as an iconic and exquisitely developed artifact, it was far from the only ancient civilization to master the art of preparing and storing cosmetics. By widening our lens, we discover a fascinating world of parallel invention where different cultures developed their own unique tools to achieve similar ends, each reflecting their own distinct values, resources, and aesthetic ideals. This comparative journey allows us to see the Egyptian palette not in isolation, but as a particularly eloquent expression of a universal, human impulse, the desire to adorn, protect, and transform the self. Just across the sands to the northeast, in the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the empires of Mesopotamia were flourishing. Here, in the bustling cities of Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon, cosmetics were also a cornerstone of daily life and high status. The Mesopotamian equivalent of the palette was often a simpler, yet highly functional grinder made from a hard, river-worn pebble. Imagine a smooth, oval stone, small enough to fit comfortably in the palm, with one flat surface worn down from constant use. These personal grinders were used to crush minerals like green malachite and the black galena the Egyptians also prized, but the cultural context was markedly different. Mesopotamian art and texts, such as the famous Epic of Gilgamesh, place a profound emphasis on fragrance and oil as tools of civilization. While eye paint was used, it was the act of anointing the body with scented oils that held greater social and religious weight. Their cosmetic kits would have included intricate, beautifully carved vessels for these precious oils, suggesting a culture where the olfactory experience of adornment was paramount, and where the simple grinder stone served a more utilitarian role within a broader ritual of scent and cleanliness, rather than being the central, symbolically charged object it was in Egypt. Venturing further into the ancient Near East, the Persian Empire presents another captivating variation. The Achaemenid Persians, renowned for their immense wealth and sophisticated court culture, were great admirers and assimilators of the customs from the lands they conquered, including Egypt. It is highly likely that the Persian elite adopted the use of kohl and other eye cosmetics through contact with the Egyptians. However, they expressed this practice through their own luxurious material culture. Persian cosmetics were often stored in exquisite containers made of precious metals, like gold and silver. Imagine a small, intricately worked gold jar with a tight-fitting lid, designed to hold kohl paste, or a delicate silver spoon for applying it. This shift from a stone grinding surface to a precious metal storage container speaks volumes about the differing cultural priorities. For the Persians, the value and status were embedded in the container itself. The material and craftsmanship proclaimed wealth and power. The ritual of preparation was secondary to the act of possession and application, reflecting a courtly culture where ready-made luxury and display were key, a fascinating contrast to the Egyptian focus on the transformative, hands-on ritual of creation using a personally owned, symbolic stone. Crossing the Mediterranean Sea, we arrive in ancient Greece, where we find a cosmetic culture that was deeply influenced by Egypt, yet distinctly its own. The Greeks were keen traders and observers, and they enthusiastically adopted the Eastern practice of using dark eye makeup. However, their tools of choice were different. The classic Greek cosmetic container was the pyxis, a small, cylindrical box with a lid, most often made of beautifully painted pottery, but also crafted from wood, ivory, or metal for the wealthy. A Greek woman would typically purchase her cosmetics pre-prepared from a market vendor. She would then store them in her pyxis, which might have separate compartments for different colors. To apply her makeup, she would use a slender bronze or bone implement, moistening the tip and dipping it into the pre-ground pigment stored in the box. This system reveals a different relationship to the cosmetic ritual. The Greeks, particularly in the democratic city-states like Athens, placed a complex value on appearance. While being overly made up could be seen as vain or deceptive, a subtle enhancement was appreciated. The pyxis was a personal, private object, often given as a wedding gift and decorated with scenes of female life. It represents a move away from the integrated, spiritual workshop of the Egyptian palette and toward a more compartmentalized, commercialized, and domestic approach to beauty. This comparison illuminates the unique qualities that made the Egyptian palette so special. In Mesopotamia, the grinder was a simple tool within a culture obsessed with scent. In Persia, the focus was on luxurious containers for pre-made cosmetics. In Greece, the decorated pyxis held store-bought pigments. The Egyptian palette, however, was an all-in-one, self-contained universe. It was the quarry, the workshop, and the storage vessel fused into a single, portable, and often deeply personal object. Its surface wasn't just functional, it was a canvas for art, heraldry, and personal identity, carved with the owner's name or prayers to the gods. This convergence of function, profound spirituality, and artistic expression is what sets it apart. The Egyptian didn't just own a cosmetic, they owned the entire process of its creation, a process that connected them directly to the divine through the very act of grinding order from chaos on a stone that was itself a sacred amulet. It was this holistic integration of the practical, the magical, and the artistic that made the humble Egyptian palette not merely a tool for beauty, but a complete and elegant philosophical statement about an individual's place in the cosmos. Our exploration of the Egyptian makeup palette reveals something far greater than an ancient grooming tool. It uncovers a complete world, carved in stone. This single elegant object was a microcosm of an entire civilization, a place where the practical and the profound were ground together into a vibrant paste. Art, science, religion, and social order weren't separate categories for the Egyptians. They were threads woven into a single, seamless fabric of daily life. The palette was the loom on which these threads converged, demonstrating that beauty was never merely superficial. It was a form of medicine, a spiritual shield, a declaration of status, and a daily ritual that connected the individual to the cosmic balance of the universe. To look at one of these palettes is to see a civilization that understood the human need for protection, identity, and meaning, and ingeniously packaged all of it into an object that could be held in the palm of your hand. This perspective forces us to reconsider so many other ancient practices we might have initially dismissed. We often look at history through a modern lens, separating what we deem practical from what we label superstitious or decorative. The Egyptian palette teaches us that this separation is a mistake. What other objects or rituals have we misunderstood? Consider the vast megalithic structures like Stonehenge. For generations, they were seen primarily as ceremonial sites or primitive calendars. But what if they served a more integrated purpose, combining astronomical observation with acoustic engineering for healing, or functioning as centralized locations for forging social bonds through shared seasonal labor that was both practical and deeply sacred. The Egyptian use of makeup as both antibiotic and amulet suggests that ancient peoples often operated with a holistic understanding we are only beginning to decode, where every action served multiple, interconnected layers of purpose. Think about the intricate body modifications practiced by cultures like the Maya, who filed their teeth and shaped their infants' heads. We might view these as extreme fashion statements or markers of tribal identity. But what if, like the kohl-lined eyes of Egypt, these practices were also believed to offer spiritual protection, to connect the individual to the gods, or to manifest a specific ideal of cosmic order? Or consider the Viking use of runes. We often see them as a simple alphabet, but they were deeply magical symbols, carved onto weapons for strength in battle and onto artifacts for safe passage, a functional script imbued with divine power, not unlike the hieroglyphs on a ceremonial palette. The common thread is a world view where the material and spiritual realms are in constant dialogue, and human artifacts are the bridges between them. So, I'm incredibly curious to hear your thoughts. What ancient practices, artifacts, or technologies do you believe we've fundamentally misunderstood by viewing them through a purely modern, utilitarian lens? Is there an object from history that you think holds a deeper, more integrated meaning waiting to be uncovered? Share your ideas and fascinating examples in the comments below. I love reading your perspectives and learning from this community. If these journeys into the mysteries of the past captivate you as much as they do me, please subscribe to the channel. We have so many more adventures to come, delving into the hidden stories and forgotten wisdom of the ancient world. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.